O'Celli effect.
I'm a big fan of the show.
Chuck O'Celli, and he's been known for many years as a blind JFK researcher specializing in intelligence agency involvement in multiple assassination, propaganda, and other global criminal operations in the 20th and 21st centuries.
Your listeners are extremely fortunate to have you.
And now, the most underrated voice in all media.
Chuck O'Celli!
Here we are, summertime, 9th day of August, 2018, allegedly, according to that thing we call a calendar, and boy is it hot in Georgia. Anyhow, this is indeed the O'Celli Effect, broadcast live from the facilities of O'Celli.com, also broadcast on a couple of other different networks and a variety of locations via, it's also available via your podcatcher du jour through a lot of different facilities out there. Some of them are working better than others, apparently. We'll hopefully straighten all that out in the coming weeks, but hard to keep track of all the different places you can get this show, so doing the best I can, folks. Anyway, it is a Thursday night, Thursday for most of you, and gotta tell you, this is the week that we have Carmine Savastano with us, and he is the author of Two Princes and a King. You might know this. Of course, he is the longest-standing co-host on this show, and gotta say, it's been an interesting trip. Why? Well, you know, one of the very first things that him and I discussed when we were first getting to know each other was the fact that we needed to do a series on the mythology connected to the JFK case. Tonight, we're going to continue that discussion. Now, again, it's summertime, so it was hard to try and book some other people to come on. We might be joined by Rob Clark at some point in the near future. Then again, who knows? Maybe he doesn't know what time it is, and maybe we miscommunicated. You never know. Again, it's summertime, so it is what it is. TPAAK.com, TPAAK.com is Carmine Savastano's website, and maybe I'll plug Rob's website if he shows up. Okay. So there is plenty to talk about when it comes to the mythology in the JFK case. Geez, what episode number are we on? We've been doing this for a couple of years, Carmine.
Yeah, this is 14.
14.
Same one that will be on for JFK 101 next episode.
Right, which is funny because that series only started, a year and a half ago?
Yeah.
And when did we start doing this? When was the first Myths episode?
2015, I believe.
Oh, so like 3
spring.
years.
Yeah, the spring of 2015 was the first one. You, me, Trish, and Zach.
And we're not out of material.
Nope. I don't know if we ever will be. It's created so quickly sometimes.
Well, isn't that the funny thing, right, is that no matter what we do, and I got to tell you that I thought about this a little bit before we did it. Have you been getting feedback on any of the myth stuff?
Oh, yeah, and largely all positive. As you know, the only real, and I really don't get any more of it, but early on, there was some of the negative feedback from those that shall remain nameless who are featured in various episodes of the Myth Show.
Right, but you know what's funny to me is that every once in a while somebody discovers one of the old Myths episodes and they bring their friends over to it and they complain in a group and then they go away. It's kind of funny. Let's see.
Yeah, like a couple years later they'll go, I saw one where they actually got all vulgar and were upset and started like screaming to the heavens and no one really paid any attention, so they went away.
Well, right, and that's the funny thing is like 6, 7 things. I mean, YouTube even starts marking it as spam. And every one of these episodes ends up on YouTube because we figure we should put them on a playlist somewhere. I mean, you're talking about 26 hours now of discussing.
A public service.
Yeah, and it's 26 hours. I mean, that's nothing to sneeze at as far as tackling all the different fallacies in the case. But they are unending, and some of them seem to come back much like a zombie apocalypse and resurrect themselves. Others have continued almost unabated despite my warnings and the warnings of others over the years. It's amazing. And go ahead.
I'm sorry, I was just going to say, and I also want to, and I know you do too, thank everyone that's ever appeared, because we've had, I would gather, probably over a dozen different people just from both sides of the case. I think myths are one of the few things that we can all find common ground on, that they're not helpful to anyone, no matter what side of the case they favor.
Well, and that's the thing, and a variety of individuals too. I mean, like even on the side that would be more your and my side, which is the concept that this is not according to the official story. Let's just boil it down to that. Go ahead.
Allendale, Larry Hancock, Rob Clark, Zach Gendro, Trish Fleming. We've also had, like, you said, people from the other side. We've had Glenn Viklin, Steve Rowe.
Sherry Feaster was on one of these.
Yep, Sherry Feaster, who I'd put on the side of conspiracy, but definitely an expert who at least is more in the middle. I'd say everyone that you had on was reasonable too, which is important. And that unfortunately doesn't happen in every show. Sometimes you'll get fringe people from either side that don't want to have a conversation. They just want to try to verbally beat down the other person.
Well, right. And I mean, I've even tried to have some of those fringe people on the show. You know that. You were there for some of it.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I had to put up with it.
Which is another funny thing that happens every once in a while. You see the YouTube comments on the, I guess it was the, the 2016 JFK, celebration of the, anniversary. Or was it 2015? I forget which.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think it was 2015. Fetzer and Hankey.
Right, and Hankey turns out to be a lot more reasonable than Fetzer.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah, I mean, and the bottom line is I understand, I understand the motivation for people to want to make something popular and want to make money. I just can't support it and, am, like you, going to fight against anything that tries to manipulate history to make money.
Well, there you go. And now with that in mind, let's talk about a recent newsmaker, right? Or a couple of them really quickly. First of all, let's acknowledge Roger Stone as one of the guys who is, in the mythmaker category when it comes to the Kennedy assassination. Absolutely refuses to look at anything other than Lyndon Johnson is responsible for it for some reason. I'm not sure why, but knowing him, there's some agenda behind it. But then again, he's also an off-the-books advisor to a presidential candidate who, wait a minute, became president, despite the fact that he was claiming that Ted Cruz's father was president with Lee Harvey Oswald and is therefore connected to the JFK assassination. I mean, hello. Weird stuff there. But we've tackled all that. One of the guys, though, that's been a conduit for all of these people at one time or another, although I can't say that he's had Judy Baker on his show. Oops, I said it.
He has had Fetzer, though.
He has had James Fetzer. He's had other people that have supported Judy on his show and other crazy individuals that want to tell you that, there's reason to believe that the alien agenda is actually behind Kennedy's assassination and that, there were, I don't know, 30 shooters. Are we up to now? 32? I'm not sure. How many shooters there were. And, we can name them, even though 3 of these names at the top of the list have already been debunked. And I'm pretty sure he even did some James Files stuff. Other people have been featured quite prominently in our myth series. And that would be, Alex Jones over there. Who, is screaming about his martyrdom, and please make sure to buy all of his crap so that you can continue to support his multi-million-dollar operation that has been so unfairly treated in recent weeks by getting banned from various platforms, although Twitter won't ban him. And these different corporate entities have made decisions based on his violation of their community policies, not based on the fact that anybody's attempting to silence him selectively or anything like that. But truth be told, a lot of the things that this man has said over the years would have gotten somebody like me, well, at least a visit from the Secret Service, if not various components of the Department of Homeland Security. But meanwhile, let's not focus on all that madness exactly. He has been one of the worst purveyors of nonsense when it comes to the Kennedy assassination. During the opening of the Obama deception, his big hit film where, the Obama Antichrist figure was here to destroy America, which apparently never came to fruition, I guess because Alex was fighting him. Even during the opening sequence of that film, JFK was killed because he was issuing silver certificates, and that mythology, the old and tried and true patriot mythology, if you will, or John Bircher mythology, if you will. I don't know what to call it, but the whole concept of it, the executive order got him killed because he was fighting the international bankers and so on. I mean, what do you got to say about Alex Jones, though? Because you're not somebody who's been highly focused on this kind of media as much as I have been over the past way too long to talk about. But really, since it's been there, I've been interested in the alternative media, so to speak. And even before there was an internet, and I was listening to it on shortwave radio and mailing in and becoming parts of little groups that got special mailings of, tape recordings and documents and all of that. I mean, I was part of that stuff a long time ago, and now I'm doing it for myself. But what are your viewpoints on Alex Jones?
Well, I definitely agree with you that he's a myth maker. I first came across him years ago. I don't know if you remember a conversation you and I had off air once was, I think that this is common for a lot of people who get involved in the JFK case, is often you have to spend probably a year unlearning all the bad information that you picked up along the way online. Mm-hmm. And in that first year, like in any, and in the study of any topic, when you are brand new to it, when you don't have the skepticism built up of having been lied to or having read something that was proclaimed to be the truth that when you check it against evidence turns out to be ridiculous, you are more likely to believe things. And some people never actually move on from that point. They just believe whatever's told to them. And that's, everybody's got their method of inquiry. That's not mine.
Well, see, hold on, Carmine, because you're going through this whole logical process. And I got to tell you, the majority of people I encounter on this case that have even a vague interest in it don't even go this far. I mean, you're making it way too complex. Honestly, a lot of them, they used to read books, now they don't, but they go on YouTube, they find a couple of documentaries that sort of comport with their own political or worldview in one way or another. And they go, that's the answer. And it doesn't matter if Jackie Kennedy is suddenly a Black Widow spider in disguise and Kennedy was actually a reptilian and it was good that he was wiped out. Or, there was a confetti cannon and the corpses were switched and various things happened and it was all done basically to keep the alien cover-up going. It's irrelevant. They just find something on the fringe and go, have you seen this? One guy who works in alternative media really got upset with me when I just completely slammed his whole, Oswald wasn't really killed, neither was Kennedy. It seems like it was just performance art. And look, there's no blood on the floor when Oswald is shot by Ruby. And I went, a little bit nuts on him and I was kind of mean. And he's like, well, I don't understand why you would do that. How could you say that? And I'm like, because when you spend a long time looking at actual evidence and investigating even the fringe stuff to some degree, stuff that you wouldn't even touch, I've been through, this. It's very frustrating to see people try to introduce new nonsense into the equation. And we'd like to prevent that. I mean, we can't erase, unfortunately, the past 20 years of people using this as an opportunity to pervade their fan fiction upon all of us and to put out these ideas about lost romances and secret super agents that were actually just this 24-year-old kid who was actually 5 different people, and there were, various duplicates of him running around, and he was like James Bond had been run through a Xerox machine. Here we go. And it's like, you just want to make people stop and look and say, look, this is important for some very realistic reasons. We should look at this reasonably. And it's hard to do in the new normal where, again, people are not reading as much. People are not taking some very serious work that others have done. and utilizing it to take it further, or correcting some of the mistaken ideas of the past and trying to improve upon them. They're literally just seizing upon something that's got a little bit of juice to it, that's got a little bit of something that is entertaining about it, and comports with the wildest theory they can come up with. So those that often claim that there's a great deal of victory in the fact that, well, most people don't believe it was, the government's story, and we're winning. We're not really winning if we get them to think the Easter Bunny did it with the candlestick in the library, okay? It's just, it's not good enough to go there and claim victory because, well, at least they don't believe the Warren Commission. You know what I'm saying? You are going through this as a reasonable person, but you got to admit that we often encounter people who just, like I said, latch on to this one outlier concept. And Alex Jones is good for huckstering that stuff. He always has been. And the fact is that, some real information is mixed in with his garbage. So, some people say, look, he's right about this and he's right about that. And it's like, yeah, but pick anybody that you want that's a disinformation artist, and you can find that they're not lying to you 100% of the time. Okay?
Well, yeah, and just because there are a few positive things doesn't mean the overall thing is worthwhile. If there are so many bad things that it totally outweighs whatever positives can be garnered from it.
Oh, absolutely. Like, us agreeing with James Fetzer that, listen, it certainly appears to have been a conspiracy. Yeah, okay, positive side doesn't mean we're on the same team. Okay, no. Is Oswald innocent? Well, that's a questionable thing. Exactly what you mean by innocent. Is he the guy that probably pulled this off? It appears no. But
not alone, at the very least.
Yeah, but see, that's the thing. You want to go lone assassin.
Oh, well, that's the simplest. Yeah, actually, when we get into guilt and innocence later, the other topic I wanted to discuss, because I later on will contend, and I think this can be demonstrated with evidence, that it is neither true that he is absolutely guilty or absolutely innocent, as some people would contend and have for years.
Right, and we actually spent time in an episode of Myths going through that as well. Again, this will be, And
it was actually the three of us, so I actually got some new information from some legal precedents. So. Well,
cool, and you know what? Look, we're going to do another one of these before the end of the year, and when we do, we're going to bring the rapid fire kind of, here's a myth, let's destroy it, mechanism back into play. And I definitely I want to gather those things up, let people have their fun for the summer. It's hard to get people to come on a talk show during the summer sometimes, to be honest with you, unless they're really out there promoting something, or they're your really good friend. It's very difficult sometimes to get people to settle down, come inside, relax, and do a podcast with you or do a radio show. So, just saying. So anyway, with all that in mind, go ahead back to your process though, because you have this reasonable mechanism. It might be a little conservative for my taste or for some other listeners' taste, but it's not craziness, and it's not, gee, I saw 3 YouTube videos, now I think I'm an expert. Like, I used to laugh when somebody said, oh, I read everything on the case, and I go, really? How many books is that? And they have a number that's, 3 or 5 or 6, and I go, okay, well, first of all, you haven't come close to reading everything. Secondly, you've read books, which are a representation of somebody else's research, and you know what? In some cases, they provide you with some very good information, and they are worthwhile. But realistically, how do you know that the information in said author's book is anything other than nonsense? But today, it's just, I saw a YouTube video, so therefore, Jackie Kennedy shot him, actually, and she's a spider, and he was a reptile, and, the Mandela effect said that Governor Connolly was never in the car. So, literally, that's the line of logic I'm getting, which, by the way, have you seen that whole thing?
That people are trying to use the Mandela effect now?
Yeah, that they're saying
explain things.
Yeah, that there was never other people in the car. There was only Kennedy and Jackie and the driver.
Unfortunately, the photography, all of it, would dispute that.
Well, see, in the new reality, then therefore, it would be changed in the new reality, but our memories would still retain the. I can't even finish the thought. Carmine, it's just, that's what it is though. Connolly was never in the car, and it's like, well, that's interesting because in the reality I was in, we were always trying to fit Connolly's wounds into the equation.
Well, yeah. I'm sorry, I was just going to say, and that's why it's very important, as you were saying, to have evidentiary standards, because you can take ideas like that and just throw them out the window. There are some things that are not worth our time to investigate. As you know, I won't use any of the fringe things I don't think are reliable, but I will investigate them from time to time if they start to gain traction, such as some of the many topics we've covered on this show.
Right.
But other than that, there's no reason to even bother with them, because you can largely see that they're nonsense just by getting involved in the first few pages. I mean, sooner or later they're going to drop the bomb where it's just a total speculation that has nothing to do with the facts, and pretty much at that point, okay, it's just a theory. It really has no weight to it.
Right. And you know what? It's the contortion that somebody desires to do intellectually too. Because when it comes to James Files, right, people have resurrected that with me and come at me again with it about James Files. He admitted to killing Kennedy. Yeah, that's true. He did confess, but his confession is questionable, because he's got most of the facts wrong. Well, they for years people said, why are they still keeping him in prison then? Because he's got something to say. That's why nobody's talking to him, and only Jim Mars interviewed him, and only this one guy has the interview, and I'm like, yeah, okay, fine. But then he got released. And now the justification is, look, they released him because he had the goods on him. That's why we haven't heard from him. Maybe it's because his story, once, people decided to see if it lined up with the evidence at all, doesn't work.
And has changed, just like every myth does.
Oh, various times. And if you get your hands on the outtakes of those interviews, every name, just like a compulsive liar. Hey, did you know Fletcher Prouty? Well, sure I did. I served with him, And
they can't produce. It's just another classic example of why we can. And it's not just restricted, as we've gone over, and I'll go over later. It's not just restricted to the public. The officials are the kings of using deception and myth in some cases. It's just, unfortunately, the public has seemed to try to mimic them. It's almost as if some people in the public think that if they craft a better lie than already exists, and it's compelling enough to convince the public, that's a good thing, instead of actually rendering the evidence so that we know the actual answer.
Right, and I also feel it absolutely obligatory to remind those that are Trump supporters that many of you told me specifically that I should be very happy that he's president because he's going to make sure that all of the documentation related to the assassination will be released because he wants to make sure to embarrass the deep state over Kennedy's assassination. Well, that didn't happen in 2017. They kicked the can down the road. Trump immediately acquiesced to the intelligence agencies, and now we have a serious uncertainty as to whether or if there is a possibility of the release of tens of thousands of documents now. Just saying. Oh, and by the way, those of you who believe in the QAnon thing, this interesting story that JFK Jr. might have staged his own death so he could become the leader of QAnon. Have you heard that story, Carmine?
No, and I wish I hadn't.
Yeah, well, I figured, listen, since Rob Clark's not here, let me bring the most outlandish thing I could find. Yeah, John F. Kennedy Jr. apparently staged his own death so that he could indeed become part of the team that would fight the deep state, and he is actually Q, in hiding. Chuck, yes.
I just wanted to say on Skype, I'll let you know, Rob did just get here.
Oh, okay, great. We'll add Rob Clark into the discussion, but let's see how this goes. However, did you hear that story? You didn't hear that story. Now you wish you hadn't. But do you have any thoughts on JFK Jr. being the infamous Q, or do you have anything you'd like to say about QAnon at all?
Well, I've already blocked a couple of QAnon people from the Neapolis Media Group Twitter. It's been a while since I've had to block anybody.
Nice.
Because they didn't like that I posted that it emerged from Jones, which is a purveyor of I think it's just, timing they say, I guess, but that was 2 or 3 weeks ago, and then as soon as I put that out, some of the QAnon people got mad at me and started are basically just trying to troll the accounts. I block them, and I haven't, really had to deal with them anymore. But okay, guys, number one, not only in QAnon, but in every consideration of everything that could be a conspiracy.
Right.
If the source is anonymous, it's not to be trusted. It's not proven. Sorry.
Well, no, but you could listen, you can always...
If you can't prove it, then you're just spouting.
Okay, but here's two points of defense, Carmine, I'm going to offer. Because you know me, I always got to play the contrarian. Yeah. 2 points of defense. First of all, the information is not trustworthy in and of itself. However, if you find it worthy of follow-up, an anonymous source providing information could be the thing that leads you to some evidence, not evidence in and of itself.
It also could be the thing that wastes your time and causes problems for no reason.
Well, this is true, but journalists utilize anonymous sources all the time in order to build stories, and when they do it with some ethics behind it, it works out pretty well. However,
unfortunately, there's lots of I just see anonymous sources no matter who uses them. I don't think journalistic reports that use just anonymous sources are as trustworthy as ones that have named sources, because then the person is subject to what they said.
Well,
anyone can say anything anonymously.
Listen, that's true. But one more thing, believe it or not, this phrase is going to come out of my mouth. In defense of Alex Jones, he is not the guy who originated QAnon. I mean, this thing originated from a 4chan discussion board.
Which I think is another reason why it can't be believed, is because it emerged from a rumor mill for entertainment. That's what they do. They're famous for starting controversies online out of nothing for their entertainment.
But Carmine, if I were JFK Jr. and I wanted to launch a covert plan many years after faking my own death to lead QAnon, I would certainly go to 4chan, wouldn't you?
No, of course not. That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard.
Okay.
It's like, why wouldn't you go to some sort of an outlet with some reliability if you really wanted to make a difference? And that's why I know this is all ridiculous. The only people that are benefiting from this QAnon ridiculousness are the people selling the T-shirts. Those are the only people benefiting from it.
Well,
and the people laughing.
And Donald Trump.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, but honestly, I don't think it's going to ultimately really benefit him. I think it's going to hurt him. In the long run,
you know what? I understand, but I'm not so sure. With all that in mind, we got the lone gunman with us. And
hey, Rob.
Right on time in the middle of the QAnon discussion, Rob Clark, the host of the Lone Gunman podcast. How are you doing, sir?
I'm doing much better now. What's happening, fellas?
Oh, you got to back off your mic just a touch because you're overdriving quite a bit. But yeah, okay. Anyway. It's good to hear from Rob. I have not talked to Rob in a while. I know you heard.
I'm still alive.
Yes, thank you. I'm glad you are. What's happening with the Lone Gunman, my friend, before we get into the mythology a bit deeper? What's going on?
I'm just on hiatus right now. Is that what they call it, a hiatus?
Well, sabbatical, yeah.
Yeah.
You're out there touring the world on kung fu walks until you've decided to return.
Exactly. I'm always watching, just interacting less.
Okay.
Well, I understand.
I'm being asked I'm being asked in the chat room to explain QAnon. All right, I will. Very briefly, this is how I would explain it. It is an organization of individuals that many are taking in certain media circles to be whistleblowers of a secretive and anonymous nature. They are calling themselves Q or QAnon, and they have quite a following among the very same people that are Trump supporters, but I do believe they pre-existed Trump supporters. They claim to have inside information from intelligence agencies and within the deep state, because they were indeed insiders at one time or are currently insiders. They are alleged to be either one individual at the head or a small group of individuals that are claiming anonymity and allegedly revealing truth to the world. However, I find them to be a joke, personally. And just yet another one of these interesting psyops that, if it is useful to somebody, you might want to consider who actually benefits. Anyways, there you go. If you just enter QAnon into a search engine, you'll find out more. But hopefully you don't get sucked into stupid. All right. Go ahead.
I just wanted to finish up and offer that the one thing I did see about them that I read in the news recently is that Anonymous is now going after them. Because personally, I don't know the motivations of either for, in a definitive nature, but I bet you Anonymous doesn't want other groups like it around. And that's what QAnon is. It's sort of a right-wing Anonymous.
Well, see, Anonymous is a funny thing. That is a label that you see tossed around a lot. Mm-hmm. But real people that were part of that were, part of the hacking deep web underground, there's really a couple of different factions there.
Okay, so a faction of Anonymous is going after them. Then.
Oh, yeah, because there's a faction of individuals claiming to be Anonymous as well that are fully in support of QAnon, which is also kind of funny. But then again, a whole lot of those guys who are really high-skilled hackers have been co-opted and hired by the governments now in order to defend against people like themselves. So, I mean, it's a very strange world you get into when you get into the deep politics of the deep web, if you will. And Anonymous, QAnon, all this stuff is all part and parcel of the shadow, smoke, and mirrors of the digital age we're in. And that's the way I see it. Anyway, the legitimate people in Anonymous that I have encountered that I do believe are absolutely legitimate, I would love to see them dismember QAnon because they're capable of it. But anyway, we'll leave it there because I don't want to get into a whole discussion on this. Yeah. Otherwise, we're not doing a myths episode. And we got Rob with us, which is a rarity. So definitely go ahead and continue, Carmine. But I'm anxious to get to talking to more with Rob, considering he's on hiatus. And it's so much fun to have you here, man. Thank you for joining us, by the way.
Yeah, no problem. I'm just glad to finally get here. I was aware of this enormous Skype update that happened, and that's why I'm late, but I'm here.
Oh, yeah, I totally understand, man. I had it when I did an update once. It erased all of my contacts.
Nice.
So luckily I had
totally
saved
new.
Before. Yeah. Okay, but yeah. So I'll just finish up the Alex Jones thing, and then if you want, we can have Rob do the first myth, and then we can jump into the other ones that I did, and whatever you want to talk about, Chuck.
Absolutely.
With Alex Jones, I only find one problem, and that was the manner and the reasoning why it was done. Yes, these are private companies. They have the right, as unfortunately we all experienced when they came after Chuck's YouTube channel, to take you down if someone complains or if someone says it's unfair. But they also have the responsibility to check. And luckily they did in Chuck's case after an appeal, and they brought it back. With Jones, he's done it so many times, he's violated their standards so often and with such flagrancy that of course they were just looking for an excuse to eventually act against him, like anyone who keeps violating their standards. But because they used hate speech as the reasoning, that's what I disagree with. No, hate speech, as I've said before, and I'm sure lots of people disagree with me and some might agree with me, is, in my opinion, ridiculous. Words can be hateful, sentiments can be hateful, but it doesn't have to be one of these specific magic words that people don't like to be hate speech. And you know what? Life doesn't guarantee that you don't have to ever be hated by anyone.
See, but then again...
That's just life.
But then again, okay, listen, Ocelli.com is my platform, right? If I deem something to be hate speech, whether I'm sane about it or not, that's my business. So quite honestly, if they deemed it as whatever, it's fine. There's no objection. And truthfully, this has been nothing more than a martyrdom as an advertising campaign for him. He's actually doing better. His apps are not, gone from their stores and all that. Google's still carrying his apps. Apple's still carrying his apps. He's getting more downloads than he ever did. Lots of traffic, lots of attention. Yeah. And after his multiple claims over the years that they're going to come and silence him, he now has something to wave around to say, look, see, I was telling you all along that the big people were going to try and stop me. The globalists were coming. And there they are. So real honestly, this plays into his whole paradigm. Number one. Number two, one other thing here that I keep having to note is if I had made these threatening statements against government officials, I promise you my door would have been kicked in. I promise you that. Okay.
Yeah, well, see, but that's the issue. I think the hate speech is ridiculous, and they shouldn't have used it because it's not a valid reason, and it gives him the ability to fight and say he's being censored. What they should have done was use the legal reasons. Like every time he said he was going to kill someone that he didn't like, every time that he did something that was illegal, like slander against the parents and the children in Sandy Hook, that's a reason that's legitimate to get rid of him, because the companies can then be sued. That makes sense in a dollars and cents way. Hate speech is ridiculous. It's too subjective.
He literally said that Robert Mueller was present during child rape. I mean,
yeah, that is something you can hammer him on legitimately.
Yeah. I mean, come on. If I made statements like that, I promise you again that I would have been either sued or taken down. This guy is controlled opposition, full stop. And he is there for the purposes of being a martyr every now and then, being taken down every now and then, but he's got plenty of privileges that he's played out over the years. And like I said, people have been taken down for saying much less. People have been visited by government agencies for saying much less than this guy did. So quite honestly, it is what it is. And you can do business with who you want. That's why, the whole thing with the people that don't want to make cakes for gay couples. Listen, that's their business if they don't want to do business with people. I know it's a slippery slope and, it gets into a weird area, but either you could choose who you do business with or not. You could throw people out of restaurants if you feel like it too, because it's your opportunity to do business with somebody or not. And if Google chose not to do business with me because I had violated some terms because I contracted with them, then it would have been just fine if they removed me because I violated some term between, us as entities. But that's not what happened to me. This is what happened to Alex Jones. He violated their terms. And that's it. He's no martyr. So anyway, I leave it at that, and I would like to get into what Rob has in mind because, man, Rob, you are the king of bringing the weirdest thing. I mean, I had to try and preempt you a little bit by bringing up the whole JFK Jr. faked his death in order to become the head of QAnon. I had to bring that in because it was the closest thing I could think of that might be able to compete with the weird stuff that you, my friend, bring to the table when it comes to myths. So I'm sure you're going to blow me out of the water tonight, but I put it out there anyway. Rob, first of all, have you heard about JFK Jr. faking his death to be the QAnon leader?
I actually have. I saw that. There's some guy out there that does a podcast. He does YouTube videos, and I stumbled upon one where he was talking about that and noting the similarities, of what he said when he was alive and what's being said now, and what he said he was going to do. And what's being done now, and there's a whole podcast dedicated to it. I mean, it's crazy, but that is definitely a good one, Chuck.
There are multiple podcasters.
It's a good one.
Yeah, there are multiple podcasters doing this, but you found one on YouTube. I didn't even see the one on YouTube. I saw it in a feed. I have a couple of podcast feeds where I take a look at what some other people are doing just to know what to avoid, to be honest with you. I've actually got like a couple of those little podcatchers set up, and I purposely pick up the worst stuff that I can. Just to go, okay, what is ridiculous and popular among people that are not thinking? I really do have two podcatchers set up just to do that. I check them about once a week. Yeah.
Yeah. It's like a good car wreck, you can't help but watch or listen, sometimes it's entertainment.
Right.
Right. You just can't believe what some of these people are saying and what they're thinking and why people are even listening. But, we've been thinking the same thing for years. And, when Carmine told me we're going to do another Myths episode, I just happened to have been contacted by a fellow, through my podcast website email. And he's an author, just wrote a book. And it's called Motive and Opportunity, H.L. Hunt. The means by which H.L. Hunt influenced the assassination of JFK, King, Bobby, and Hoffa.
Hang on, Rob.
Okay.
Motive and Opportunity. Carmine,
yes.
Let me ask you your impression of just that title before we get into H.L. Hunt and wherever this goes, connecting it to Bobby and King as well, Rob?
Yeah, and Hoffa.
Okay. Before we get into that nexus, you take a look at a book that's titled Motive and Opportunity, and you think to yourself, well, gee, the only thing that's missing from that is the means, right, Carmine?
Yeah, exactly. That's what I was going to say. There's something missing from that title.
Yeah, but it almost sounds serious enough that maybe you go, well, let me take a look. I mean, it's not, hey, I'm going to tell you how the the people that worked in the freak show in Massachusetts actually plotted the murder of Kennedy or something. This is, or the guy who said he was a rodeo rider that was part of a car theft ring that killed. You know who I'm talking about, don't you, Rob?
Yeah.
It's not one of those. You go, oh, okay, motive and opportunity. And there was a time period here where certain people died and people disappeared and a lot of death going on. Maybe it is all connected, and you almost want to take it seriously. Well, anyway, I'll let Rob continue, and we'll find out why not to. Go ahead.
Yeah. Well, when the guy contacted me, I was like, all right, look, you send me a copy of your book, and I'll read it, and I'll let you know what I think about it, and if I decide to have you on the show to further explore what you've written about here, that's a viable possibility as well. But I wanted to read the book first because, sometimes when you get to be as skeptical as we are about
because
things,
Richard Charnan's an author.
Yeah. And I personally, I had never heard of this guy before. The author's name is Mitchell.
Because David Von Pine has also released a book, and Roger Stone, we already mentioned. Yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry, Rob. Go ahead.
Yeah. Well, this guy's Mitchell Whitington is the author. And it's one of those, this is my story. I was there. I lived it. John Curington as told to Michael Whitington. Okay. So the book, the story is basically one of those, hey, I was there, this is what happened type deals. And Mitchell is just relaying to us what John Curington told this guy. And you mentioned, okay, the title is just Motive and Opportunity. And this guy certainly had the means as well. At one time, he was the richest man in the world. I mean, we're talking about H.L. Hunt here. He's worth, in today's money, $2 billion.
Okay, well, one second, Rob. I'm a little confused because what you're telling me is the author is telling us a story that he was told by a particular individual, and that individual claims to have been involved directly with key actors and players in the story. Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay, I just want to make sure I got this straight.
For many, many years. A fellow by the name of John Curington. He did work for H.L. Hunt. There's plenty of things of proof in here with letters from H.L. Hunt about this guy. He definitely did work for H.L. Hunt, for a period of probably 20 to 30 years. He was under his employ, for quite a while. Much like, the story you've heard of, I forget what his other employee's name was, the guy that he supposedly sent to buy a copy of the Zapruder film. I don't know if you've heard that about H.L. Hunt sent somebody to buy a copy of the Zapruder film.
Oh yeah, I've heard of that. And another thing that strikes me here right away is that, Bar McClellan was indeed a lawyer and certainly worked for a significant law firm. That was connected to Lyndon Johnson. Now, you go beyond that claim, who knows where we're going. But Bar McClellan, it almost sounds like a Bar McClellan-esque story here.
Right. And that's what I'm thinking. So I started reading this book. I try to dispel my doubts. I just don't want to throw the book against the wall, but so I figured I'd give it a chance. So, I'm reading through here and, I'm kind of, it's kind of interesting because it tells you a lot about H.L. Hunt's life and, all the money that he made and stuff that he did. And then, of course, has Mr. Curington's story, what all he did for H.L. Hunt and what kind of man he was and the kind of business that he did, So I'm thinking, okay, well, let me keep on flipping here and get to the juicy bits, about JFK and MLK and Bobby and Hoffa and all this, so I can see what the hell this guy's trying to say here. Because if you listen carefully to the subtitle, it's the means by which H.L. Hunt influenced the assassination of JFK, King, Bobby, and Hoffa, which it is entirely possible. At the time, H.L. Hunt, he's one of the richest men in the world. In the early 60s, he starts a radio show called, I think it was called Lifeline, or something to this effect. And he was basically, very right-wing hate speech, if you will, like true hate speech, not fake hate speech, but, he was getting on the air. He would buy time at all these radio stations. I mean, he would pay like $6,000, I think it was a week to get on these radio stations and to do his show. It was like a 15-minute show every day that he did. But it was just very right-wing, extreme right-wing kind of stuff, and he would say things about JFK, Martin Luther King, Bobby Kennedy, Jimmy Hoffa. The reason he didn't like Jimmy Hoffa is because, Hoffa was trying to unionize a bunch of, his unions would have affected H.L. Hunt's employees. I mean, he was a big employer. He employed thousands and thousands of people nationwide, in all these different industries. And for Hoffa to try to unionize a lot of his industries, he was very against it. You know what I'm saying? And of course he had his reasons why he wasn't a fan of JFK and Bobby and Martin Luther King. And, he shared these same views as a lot of people did back then. Guys like General Walker, he tells a story that General Walker and H.L. Hunt were friends. They used to visit each other. They would often talk and trade stories, and dispense the same kind of information and hate speech and things of this nature. And what, it doesn't say, the book doesn't really come out and say, hey, H.L. Hunt paid for the assassination to take place like I thought it was going to. And in fact, in this book, it dispels one of our biggest myths that we've covered on the show.
Okay, well, let's just recap really quickly. What you're telling me is there's some decent information in here, kind of laying out the influence that H.L. Hunt was attempting to have, and of course he was a big oil man, certainly a rich man for his time. Like you said, he'd be a billionaire today, so he would certainly be a player. He'd probably have a lot more effective means than buying 15 minutes worth of radio time across a bunch of stations. Nowadays, right. He would have a lot of things at his disposal. I mean, he could potentially be like a really
Alex
angry
Jones.
Koch brother kind of guy, and supporting somebody like Alex Jones, indeed, to say, hey, listen, just give me 15 minutes worth of your broadcast per day, because, there used to be a figure named Phyllis Schlafly who was out there doing this, right? Which, by the way, go ahead and Google that if you want, listeners, because you'll find an interesting lineage connected to Phyllis Schlafly, who died, I think, a couple of years ago, and her offspring and the influence they've had over media over several years. But she was like the woman's voice of conservatism, if you will. H.L. Hunt did a less tame version of that. And today, like I said, he would be highly influential in a lot of media circles, probably. Who knows? Maybe he could even be Rupert Murdoch, right?
Yeah.
But what's fascinating is, okay, so he definitely played the game as far as being on the side of wanting to quash the progressive concepts in this country. Certainly was on the right-wing side of the equation. Definitely didn't seem to be all that kind to poor people, and didn't want to see unions come into play. So he was one of these guys, and that kind of thing is laid out pretty well in this book, you're saying?
Yeah. I mean, he wasn't very fond of, minorities or civil rights or things like that.
Yeah, okay. So, in other words, a fair portrayal of stuff that was going on in H.L. Hunt's stratosphere, his universal orbits, if you will, as far as his influence. I mean, it's kind of laid out nicely here. But here's the fun part. You're going to tell us that it absolutely dispels one of the myths that's very popular that we've had to cover on this show. Oh, and I'm going to have to remind myself to ask you about the LBJ connection to the book, but go ahead and tell us about this, because I'm anxious to hear what myth got dispelled in this book.
Well, I will tell you. It's one of our most popular myths that a lot of people love to throw up in your face and say, well, this happened, and this person was there, and that person was there, and, it definitely happened. Well, there was a woman who claimed to be LBJ's girlfriend and part of a very elite group. I believe he doesn't mention her name, but I believe we all know who that is, Madeline Duncan Brown.
Right.
It says she said in both print interviews and on television shows that the night before the assassination of John Kennedy, she was attending a party with Johnson at the Dallas home of oil man Clint Murchison. According to her, the guest list was a regular who's who of the day, including Murchison, Hoover, Assistant FBI Director Clyde Tolson, a banker and Washington player John J. McCloy, Richard Nixon, Lyndon Johnson, George Brown, Jack Ruby, H.L. Hunt, Hunt's right-hand man, yours truly, John Carrington. So she even said this guy was there, and says, I've seen the guest list vary depending on who's relating the account, but those are the major players that seem to usually be named. And the alleged lady friend of LBJ contends that once all the players had arrived, the men retired behind closed doors for a meeting. And according to her account, when the meeting was over, LBJ came up to her and said, after tomorrow, those goddamn Kennedys will never embarrass me again. That's no threat. That's a promise. We've all heard the story.
Right.
The only problem with her story is that the meeting never happened. I never went to such a gathering. I can also say with a high degree of certainty that Mr. Hunt did not attend either. If he had gone to Clint Murchison's house, there's simply no question that he would have asked me to drive over with him. Not only did I accompany him almost everywhere, but I knew almost every minute of his daily schedule. More than that, however, there are people on the guest list that would never been in the same room with each other. Jack Ruby is probably the most obvious. He was a wannabe gangster at best, so even if he was going to be used as part of some plot or conspiracy, he would never have been asked to be part of the planning stage with some of the most powerful men in the world. So there you go. He basically says it's a wonderful story, but it didn't happen.
Well, and I'd add to that, it lines up with so many of the other, problems that we've heard over the years, like Charles Cliff brought to one of the Old Myths episodes that Murchison actually didn't own the house that she claimed it happened in at the time, and she said it happened. And then we have the fact that LBJ and Kennedy were seen in town getting ready for the events of the next day. They weren't at LBJ wasn't at some meeting way the hell out at Murchison's house. My thing too is why even have a secret meeting if you're going to have so many people? It's not very secret, is it? If you need 20 people at a meeting, you've pretty much blown the conspiracy. There's no reason to have it anymore. Well,
see, and also, why are you inviting your girlfriend? Because why is Madeline Brown there in the first place? Okay. Yeah. Which, again, alleged girlfriend, fine. I'm satisfied that she had some sort of relationship with Johnson. At some point, I don't know. Probably. And I mean, he may have indeed been the father of her son. I even will go that far.
Do you know who pushed that, though, for quite some time, just to bring it all back around?
Tell me.
Alex Jones.
Well, of course he did.
Right.
But then again, so did some of the venerated figures of past JFK. The spirit of JFK assassinations past.
Oh, I know.
Jim Mars.
And I don't make any excuses for any of them either.
No, I'm not making an excuse.
Yeah, it was a mistake.
No,
you said venerated, so I just think those who make excuses for them are doing a disservice to them.
Right.
They made mistakes. And some people in Fetzer's case, I'm sorry, but it's no longer a mistake. When you're committed so vehemently to being wrong, and you will just trash anybody and not even give a thought to evidence, you're the problem. You're just as bad as officials.
Well, no, but he had over 100 conversations with Madeline Brown.
Yeah, okay. Exactly. But Jim Mars did some good in the assassination community, unlike Jim Fetzer. But
No, I'm not saying that they're essentially the exact same thing, but I'm saying that unfortunately Mars bought into JVB.
Yes, he did.
Mars never met a conspiracy he didn't like.
See, now that's the problem with Mars. You're right. But here's what's interesting is yet again we have another person who's, alleged to have been there who couldn't have been because he says he wasn't. First of all, well, gee, Chuck, you don't think the guy would lie to cover it up? Maybe. But it's interesting that he's willing to reveal all these other intimate details, and he's part of a book that kind of lays out the idea that Hunt would have been somebody who influenced the assassination. And yet, see, this story would actually be helpful to the guy writing this book if it was true, right? The assassination party's true. I've got one of the people on the guest list. It would have been helpful to him. But over the years, the assassination party is one of those things that just it does not hold water. It just doesn't. Hoover being cited in Washington way too early to have gotten back from Dallas when he did, if he had been there. How is it LBJ slipped everybody's notice? I mean, it's not like he was easy to miss in a crowd. LBJ was kind of a big guy who made his presence known everywhere he went. Why do you have your girlfriend there? Why is there a party anyway where you're plotting things in a separate conference room allegedly, right? No, and no. But it's interesting that a book like this sort of looks like it's going to be, oh wow, we're going to go through the, incredible, the oil men killed him story. Right. And meanwhile, we don't get that. We actually get something that's a whole lot more reasonable, Rob, it sounds like to me.
Yeah, I mean, the basic crux, sorry, not the crust, but the basic crux of the book centers around the fact that maybe Mr. Hunt didn't have any direct influence as far as he didn't have any planning or payments or anything of that nature towards the assassination, but that Hunt always thought that the things that he said on the public airwaves could have possibly influenced people like Lee Harvey Oswald, Sirhan, James Earl Ray, basically what he was saying on the radio, is what he was worried about, things happening in real life that he could be possibly blamed for, or saying, well, if you hadn't have said what you said about JFK and how he was this and how he was that, you're making people that listen to you, act out on what you're saying. And it says in the book, he was generally scared that he had influenced, some of these people to take up a gun and murder, these famous leaders because of the things that he was saying.
Well, I gotta be honest. I mean, let's examine that particular idea objectively really quickly. Carmine, if you had been on air saying a lot of very hateful things, about somebody in particular, and I don't think we've ever actually done that on this show, but if we were being hateful and really oh, gee, I wish this person would disappear from the planet and how awful of a human being they are and they're devoid of value and gee, if somebody ran them over with a car, it would be all right. If we were saying that about somebody and, a matter of fact, a group of somebodies who happen to be on a particular side of an equation that we didn't like, and, then they start in short order turning up dead after we've spent time and money making sure to get that message out there, first of all, I might feel a little oh, maybe I'm guilty of inspiring somebody's ideas. I can actually see that. I mean, couldn't you see that, Carmine?
Yeah. Well, yeah, it's totally possible. If you've got somebody who is mentally unstable or weak-minded, even an unintentional, even if you offhandedly said something, yeah, sure, they could want to go act on it. I don't know whether or not, because I know we're just over the hour, we can do it right when we come back, or if you want to go a little bit long, because I have a live update for this. I actually found something in Weisberg's archives while we've been talking that has to do with this guy, and apparently he's backwalking the story and adding a few things now because there's an older version of this story that he presented to the Inquirer.
You know what? Let's go over the hour break. But Rob, this is great. I like that you presented this one. Is there anything you'd like to add before Carmine gives us a little live update to the story?
I just wanted to address real quick the Dear Mr. Hunt letter from Lee Harvey Oswald?
Well, explain what it is first. Explain it first. Remember, not everybody knows what that is, but go ahead.
Okay. There was a Dear Mr. Hunt letter that surfaced sometime after the assassination that was dated November 8th, 1963. And it says, Dear Mr. Hunt, I would like information concerning my position. I am asking only for information. I am suggesting that we discuss the matter fully before any steps are taken by me or anyone else. Thank you, Lee Harvey Oswald. Okay?
Okay, now over the years, that has been presented as, by certain people, a letter to not H.L. Hunt, but to E. Howard Hunt. Right?
That's right.
Because they would say that this is Oswald reaching out to a CIA-based colleague about his position and being very vague in his language to try and establish first of all, why would you do that with a letter if you're two CIA guys? But anyway, that's what that's been alleged to be.
Rather than your name.
Yeah, that's another thing too. But that's what that's been alleged to be over the years. To my knowledge, Rob, what do you want to say about that?
Well, it's hard to say the provenance of this letter just kind of showed up. Nobody really knew where it came from. That myth is dispelled here as it says this letter showed up in our inter-office mail system at, the Hunt headquarters after the assassination, and that in and of itself wasn't peculiar. The 60s were more of an innocent age, and people will find the stories in this book of getting on an airplane with a briefcase full of money or using an airline ticket in someone else's name to be altogether unbelievable. In reality, the idea of security was nothing even close to what it is today. By the same token, people would often drop off an envelope at the front desk of Hunt Oil, and it would get put into the mail system for delivery to the addressee. That is exactly how the Dear Mr. Hunt letter came in, and since it did, in fact, involve Mr. Hunt, and did in fact suggest a meeting with Oswald, we elected in turn to turn it over to the FBI, and we never saw it again. In private, Mr. Hunt did raise a question as to whether Lee Harvey Oswald could have been a lifeline listener, something that I think might have been a concern for him. He says the letter has become legendary over the years. Some say it was from an anonymous source, or from Mexico, or from this person or that. And it's been said that it was definitely written by Oswald because on one particular curlicue on a letter, or that it couldn't have been written by Oswald because of another particular curlicue on another letter. Personally, I have no idea whether it was written by Oswald or not. I only know that it showed up in our office and we gave it to the FBI.
Okay. Now, what that shows you, first of all, is that a lot of things happened after the assassination where people tried to draw a lot of lines. Like I've stated on this show, Oswald was cited in 23 different cities. I think the FBI had down at one point. And all kinds of things after his death, by the way. But after the assassination, this letter shows up, which is almost meaningless. Now, is it possible that it was entered into the, internal mailing system by a prankster, by somebody who was looking to get back at Hunt, who didn't like his radio broadcasts, or did it indeed come from Oswald? There's all sorts of possibilities there, but as he said, this is where the thing kind of comes from. He doesn't know who originated it. He's not a guy who studied it or is an authority on the provenance of said piece of writing. So he just basically says what he knows about it here. It sounds to me like a fairly honest book, but I guess there's some addendums to this story. Anything else you want to add here, Rob?
Just with the JFK, to tie that up, before we talk about any of these other guys, he says that H.L. Hunt met with Marina Oswald on a Saturday morning in 1963, a short time after the Kennedy assassination, and that she came into the Hunt Oil offices at approximately 7 a.m., and Currington was told to clear out everybody out of the lobby and everybody off his floor and keep people out of the building. Says Mr. Hunt showed up at 8:30 a.m. and that soon a woman would come into the lobby. I was not to speak with her or even acknowledge your presence with that. He turned and walked to the elevator and took it upstairs. A bit later, a woman did in fact walk into the building. She was alone and wearing a modest dress. I recognized her immediately as Marina Oswald, the widow of Lee Harvey Oswald. At that time, her picture was all over the media, newspapers, magazines, and television, and because of recent events, she was a very recognizable person. There's just no question that it wasn't her. He says, we didn't speak or even glance at each other. She ignored me and walked directly to the elevator, pushed the button and disappeared inside. I did not see what destination her floor was. And that she spent approximately an hour upstairs and then came out and left. And basically, Hunt had never done that before. He had never ordered the office, the building cleared of people, nor did he ever do it again while I worked for him. At the time, H.L. Hunt's political views were well known. The Hunt name had spread throughout the world, and many fingers were being pointed at H.L. Hunt involving the death of John Kennedy. He basically says she denied meeting with Mr. Hunt in a later interview, and that he thinks that H.L. Hunt felt sorry for the woman and possibly gave her some money.
Well, you know what? That sounds like a fairly realistic and a reasonable account of what may have happened according to a witness testifying about what they saw, in written form. Sounds pretty good, Rob. Actually, not a bad book. I had bad feelings when you brought it up. Sounds like a pretty interesting book. However, Carmine says he has some other information, so I'd like to hear about that.
I think Rob, too, can help us figure this one out because he has the modern version of what's going on. So this is the older one. So while Rob was talking about it, I figured, what the hell, I'll just check out, see if anything pops up. And just so happens that Harold Weisberg collected an Inquirer article that he put into the Weisberg archives over at Hood University. And and I sent you guys a copy via the Skype. It says, JFK assassins got money from Kennedy hating. So it seems like the story was different back when it first appeared. Now he's sort of like, as Rob said, he's trying to walk it back a little like, Hunt didn't mean to. Maybe it was the radio. In this one, Hunt's definitely part of it.
Well, but see, in fairness, again, though, it's the National Enquirer. All right, so.
Exactly. Which Judy has appeared in, which Files has appeared in. It seems that almost every bad myth that comes along does their stint at the Inquirer. Well,
they not only do their stint, but they get recycled every couple of years, and you see brand new information, and it's the same thing they published back in the 80s. Just, they figure most of those readers have died off now. So
yeah, there are definitely some similar. I mean, like, of course, it's the John Currington guy that Rob was talking about. And he says, he was a close assistant of Hunt, and he said there was an amazing group of political parasites drawn to Hunt because of his radical right-wing views. Members of right-wing groups like the John Birch Society, Liberty Lobby, and KKK in New York, and Washington, and Dallas, and other places. But here's, I think, what might be the big difference. I don't know if this is in the new book, so Rob can tell me if it is. Did Hunt give packets of $40,000 to various people, various right-wing radicals outside the Hunt organization? Because that's what he's saying he did in this, is that he was just handing out big bunches of money that couldn't be traced. And in this, Hunt actually kind of has...
Yeah, he does mention it.
Yeah.
And in the RFK section of this book, he mentions a trip made to California 2 weeks before RFK was shot, where they stayed at the Ambassador Hotel. And he said Currington says that he was told to have somebody deliver $40,000 to somebody in California for whatever purpose. Currington said he didn't take it himself, that he was tasked with finding somebody to take it to somebody. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So, and he definitely mentions the $40,000.
Okay, so he also says in this earlier version that I was convinced. Okay, so does he have? Because the letter is mentioned, but once again, there's no provenance to it. It's just it came from somewhere. They believed it. It says believing that they were acting on Hunt's veiled. Because see, in this older version, it seems like Hunt is acting as a conspirator. he's not kind of, walking it back a little bit like he is more in the modern version. Because Hunt actually meets with Oswald, according to this. Does he meet with him in the later book?
No. Yeah,
he meets with Oswald, and he says, via the letter, they say, or whatever, they say that, and Currington actually says that he knew Oswald was a parasite, and like you said, the thing with Ruby, they meet with Ruby. What is it? It says, let me get to the part. Currington, the day after Oswald was arrested, I called urgently to Hunt's office. Hunt told me he wanted to find out what security measures surrounded Oswald at the Dallas Police Headquarters and City Jail. So he was basically, he's attributing that he set Oswald up to get killed with Ruby.
Right.
Does he say that in the new one?
He mentioned some talk with Joseph Savello. Who was, in Mafia in Dallas at the time.
Yep. Yeah, one of the big guys.
And there's something like that mentioned, yeah.
Okay,
Well, again, this is the National Enquirer, and I actually found a link to, which I'm going to provide to the listeners in the live chat room, and I'll also attach to the podcast, which is alleged to be a full text of an interview from Currington John W. regarding these topics at archives.org, I think. Yeah, archive.org. And, look, I leave it as an open question. But the description of the book that Rob has given here and the interesting stuff which has been debunked in that book, leads me to believe that maybe the Enquirer ran with parts of a story and possibly embellished it. I mean, I know it's a crazy concept that the Enquirer might embellish a story, but I've actually known people that have had articles written about them in the Enquirer. And,
yeah, when they're the target, I totally understand that embellishment's going to occur and they're probably going to lie about them. I just think when they go to the Enquirer or when it's a beneficial article, there's definitely questions. And it's not like, I'm not saying that there aren't things in the modern, but once again, there are positive things, but I still don't think that H.L. Hunt had anything to do with JFK's death.
Well, see, I know, and I understand, but like one of the guys that I knew that was in one of those gangster editions of the Enquirer in the early 2000s was a brother, actually. They call him brother Frank, and Frank Minucci, who was in the Enquirer article they categorize him as a soldier for the Lucchese crime family and the president of the Hells Angels. The truth is that he was the president of the Nomads, which is a sect of the Hells Angels, and that he had never been a full-fledged gangster in the Lucchese crime family. However, he was an associate. But the Enquirer embellished various parts of his story, and that was a personal friend of mine that I knew quite well. Okay. And, and I've got other examples too, but who wants to go through all of it? What I'm saying is that, taking a look at an Enquirer article might give you a point of interest, but, to think that reliable journalism is being done there is yet another kettle of fish altogether, wouldn't you say?
Yeah. I don't think it's reliable journalism. I think it shows that he wanted to get the story out. And it was a long time ago before this version came out.
Oh yeah, and back when this was being done, the payment they paid the subjects of stories,
still
$200,
as you know, with the Trump thing.
And they still do. I've been told it's up to $500 if you have a nothing story, pretty much, that they're willing to print, and it goes on more than one page, you get $500. There it goes. At one time, I know it was $200. But, and it doesn't matter if you're, again, the guy who's being written about or you're the source or whatever, they pay for their articles. And look, fair enough. But, to expect, the facts to be straight in that earlier version, it could be that he gave them the very same version that Rob is reading. And, it might not point to an inconsistency in his story. It could be an inconsistency in the Enquirer's writing. I'm just trying to be fair to Currington here,
And that's fine. But I also think the inconsistency isn't with Currington or any of this. I think it's with H.L. Hunt. I think that's the big inconsistency, is that people have been pushing the oil man thing for decades, and there really is no substantial evidence for it.
Well, right, but again, although it's interesting that, and by the way, there's more to that book because, like you said, it ties to Bobby Kennedy's assassination, King's assassination, Hoffa. I mean, there's a lot more going on.
Do you think? See that? I think too, though, that's one of the things that makes me doubt it. Is that really this one guy did all those? Really?
Well, no, but the thing is,
it's just so complex for one. Now we're going to add other ones.
But to say that there wasn't a general public sentiment that was being created, like if it really boiled down to H.L. Hunt's media influence and money being added into certain causes, he could believe himself to be a direct contributor to all of those coming from one particular side of the equation. So that is not unreasonable as long as they're not drawing direct lines to paying assassins and creating groups of people that are out there to murder people directly. Actually, it sounds a lot more plausible because there isn't that bit of juicy detail in it. Sounds like anyway, Rob. I mean, you read the book. Tell us.
Yeah, I mean, you know, we all know, and heard the stories of J. Edgar Hoover being tight with H.L. Hunt. Now, I'm going to drop some juicy bits on you because there is some high specifics concerning the Martin Luther King thing.
Well, look, before we go there, we're really late on the break, so I want to take my break. And then, you know, we'll reorganize our thoughts a little bit and come back and drop some more juicy bits and maybe in rapid-fire fashion get through a couple of other quick myths here because we're going to run right out of time, yeah.
Exactly. This one, you know, we always get engaged on the weirdo stuff that Rob brings.
Well, I love it. I am still in awe of the Scientology one. That is the best ever.
Yeah, the Hoover one, not the Hoover, but Hubbard one is going to be one to top. But no, and honestly, I can just I'll throw the legal in a future one, and we can just do the McVicker, the new research stuff as my myth. And then we can go back into this when we come back.
Sounds good. So we're taking the break late, but this is the JFK Myths series that we're continuing. Rob Clark from the Lone Gunman podcast, and of course, Carmine Savastano, the author of Two Princes and a King, is with me. TPAAK.com, Neapolis Media Group here in full effect. And thankfully, we got Rob to show up during the summer because, as I said, it's difficult to get people here in the summertime. And glad to have Rob Clark along with us. So we'll get through this break really fast and come right back at you so we can finish out this, the 14th episode of Myths. JFK Myths, Assassination Myths, here on the Ocelli Effect. Stick around. WallStreetWindow.com. Gold, silver, the stock market. WallStreetWindow.com. The brilliant author of The War State brings you exclusive reports about the big changes upcoming in the markets. WallStreetWindow.com. Perhaps you're invested deeply. Perhaps you're not in deep enough. Maybe you're thinking about getting started. WallStreetWindow.com. Michael Swanson, the brilliant author of The War State, understood these trends professionally for many years, and now he gives you the benefit of his knowledge. WallStreetWindow.com. Go there now. Go there now. Go there now.